what do you think of when you hear the word wizard?
Wizard.
Oh man. I think of some weird, not necessarily weird, but generally an elderly fellow who is somewhat mysterious and likes to read books and has some sort of weird powers.
I just think of a homeless man with a beard.
Yes.
Right, like you're like, oh, look at that wizard over there.
Okay, what? Okay, you guys are both lying. You
What
don't
do you-
think of because I think of Mickey Mouse from Fantasia
Oh,
with the blue wizard hat with the
Yeah,
stars
yeah.
and the moons on it and the star wand. And
That's
then
Mickey Mouse.
immediately,
That's not a wizard.
well, I mean, you like Will said, a homeless guy. I don't think that's a wizard. Like,
That's true.
do you not think of Gandalf? Do you not think of Dumbledore? I feel like that's just what people think of.
Well, so when I hear when I hear normies out in the world say the word wizard,
Oh my god!
they're either saying a person is super good at something, like, oh man, he's an Excel wizard,
He's a whiz kid.
or they're referring to like their creepy brother-in-law who just doesn't do anything. He's like he's this weird wizard kind of guy who lives in the basement, who's also really
Weird.
good at Excel. Welcome to Vox Arcana. I'm William,
I'm Jake.
I'm David.
and this is a Dungeons & Dragons podcast, episode 14, The Wizard. We're continuing our class series this week, and as I mentioned, we're talking about wizards. The most magical, fantastical class in the game. So you want to play a wizard. Jake, what do you think of the wizard?
I'm not a fan of the wizard. I think if you want to play a wizard, you have to be very, 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 very times 10 more varies prepared to play the wizard. And players that just kind of are interested in spell casting and want to be creative or like the idea of magic, I push them towards being a sorcerer. Because I don't know, wizards, there's so much bookkeeping. And like, I guess that fits the character of like a wizard is literally.
I was literally
bookkeeping.
about to say, like, I think prepared is like one of the best words that you could use to describe a wizard.
Bookkeeping and being
Bookkeeping
prepared.
and being prepared just are a wizard.
And see,
So
I hear
if-
that and I go,
But for me, like, that's like hearing that, I'm just like, oh, I'm excited. Like, there's all sorts of like spells that I got to keep track of and just be aware of, and it's like, oh, I got to manage my spell slots.
that is
So-
I got to do
incredible.
damage.
There is something really enticing to me because I think D&D is supposed to be, or at least in its earlier versions, kind of a resource management game. When you're tracking, even though we're not tracking torch oil and we're not tracking rations, really, I mean, I am because I'm weird, but a wizard is also tracking these resources, and that is like,
Yes.
what spells do I anticipate needing today? And you really have to make that decision every day. Unfortunately, in the games I've played, players can kind of lie or wiggle their way out of that commitment because they're like, oh, well, I have Unseen Servant. I had it all along, prepared. So let's carry this huge treasure chest with me out of the dungeon, you know? But I like the notion of having to make these decisions before you know if it's the right decision.
Yeah.
weird.
You gotta
'Cause
do
see,
your
I
research
think
ahead of time.
when I think of a spellcaster, I think of like Avatar: The Last Airbender. Like I think of a firebender. And it's like, okay, they're a pyromancer, and they can
so cool.
always manipulate fire, and fire is their thing. And it's just fire, 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 and how can I be creative with my fire? That's how I like magic. Like, I'm thinking for myself as a player, like, I want to be able to have something that I can always manipulate, that I can always use, that I have to be creative with, as opposed to like, all right, do a puzzle to figure out what you anticipate will be in the dungeon next. It's not my idea of fun. And I respect that other people like you, David, find that fun, but it's just
different
too
style.
much. Yeah.
And I really enjoy like trying to problem solve, like, how can I use this spell to just secretly defeat this boss like super easily? Like, how can I use levitate here?
Yeah. That it is so fun because, well, fun for David and I, probably not for Jake. Just because I feel like the wizard, when we think of it, I think of fireball and all these damaging spells, but frankly, the utility is just incredibly high for them because they can move things, teleport, whatever. more than anybody else. And so they have tricks that they can be very hard to DM for, because if you're like, oh well, there's this high ledge, it's like 300 feet in the air. He's like, oh, I cast fly, and I get it.
Yeah.
You're like, oh dang it, that was the whole dungeon I was gonna make you do.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can see why wizards could be just not welcome in a campaign, because they absolutely can destroy a conventional logic puzzle.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. My biggest fear in playing with wizards is that they can destroy things with just a snap of their fingers because of their spell that they had prepared. Or my biggest fear is that they were in the middle of combat and they go, oh, let me check how this spell works again after they cast it. And so everyone, the rogue gets on their phone and the ranger goes to the bathroom, and suddenly everything grinds to a halt because of the bookkeeping. And so I guess that's my fear of the wizard. But my one player that has played as a wizard before was absolutely incredible, because they said, I will do the legwork. I have a spell book. I will do all my leveling up. I will do all my spell slots. And it was just so nice that they did all that, but they still, were honest and had what spells they had prepared. And I don't know, it was beautiful. And that character is actually a huge NPC in my later games because it was such a great character. So my one experience with the wizard has been great, but in general, I try to shy people away from it because it takes a lot of legwork and bookkeeping.
So you bring up a really good point about the risk of having a wizard at the table is just slowing the entire game down. One way that I got around this in my last campaign was there's many spellbook apps you can get. The particular one that I use is not available anymore in the App Store. But I made all the players download that to their phones. And all of a sudden, there was no more pausing to look up anything. And so when the players were on their phones, they were looking up spells to use on their turn, which was terrific. And so we had a paladin, and a cleric, and a wizard, and a druid. And so everybody's using spells all the time.
Oh, yeah.
And that one little optimization, which came in at, I think, the second or third to last session, so I was kind of mad at myself for not innovating faster, just saved the day.
Yeah, I think that spells in general just can slow the game down if you're not careful and your players don't take the time to be prepared and know what their class does.
Well, part of that, it depends on the spell, right? I find that the longer spell descriptions are just being hyper-specific. Like, if you look at, I think it's called Control Weather, oh my gosh, it's like an entire page in the player's handbook. But then you have stuff that's like Magic Missile. Hey, look at that, 3d4 damage, boom, I'm done.
Boom, there you go, kid. Pew, pew, pew.
So it just depends. I've even seen people pick spells based on just what they were willing to read through. There's some people who look and they see a big wall of text and they're like, I'm not choosing that. It could be the best spell in the game, I'm not choosing that.
Yeah, that's just too much.
And that's fine. A player is going to play the kind of class, and they're going to play in the style that they find the most comfortable. And I think the wizard is not comfortable for everyone.
Yeah,
and
fine. I think for me, I've noticed which players want to be the wizard because they will text me at 3 a.m. and be like, okay, I think I'm going to do this spell and this spell. And they're you can tell they're so invested in what the wizard is outside of the table. They don't just show up and, take a sip of their beer and be like, all right, what do I do again? They know exactly how their class works. And I think some of the most, the players that like the mathy, the gamey, the crunchy part of the game of D&D, they're the ones that are attracted to the wizard because they can utilize all of the game design and kind of get to flex their muscles that aren't, necessarily creative, but they're problem solving and kind of puzzly. I don't even know how to explain it, but yeah.
We had a player in my, actually David knows this too. He's a guy in my campaign I'm running now. He was playing a cleric and he just kind of jumped into the role. I didn't read up on the character. And then we were playing one week and one of my other players said, you can do that? I didn't know you could do that. And the other guy says, I didn't either. And the other guy says, you need to know your class. He says, come back next week and I want you to know your class. And sure enough, he did. He came back next week. He had read every single spell, every class feature for cleric.
Wow.
And he was a powerhouse. He looks at me and he says, there's so much I wasn't doing. And for the rest of the session, whenever he's there, his cleric is on it, and he doesn't look up spells. Like he's referencing them to remember them now. He's not looking at them for the first time.
Yeah.
And it really flows, and it feels like magic flowing out of this guy.
Yeah.
I love it. And so I think the wizard can be the same. Obviously, it's a lot more homework because you have to read, I think, 50 pages of spell material. But
if you're level 1, it's not that much.
That's true. But for the right player, that is just a sweet character to play for them.
It's fun. So
David, for instance.
Yes. I am a wizard in real life. Don't challenge me on that. So what would you guys say is/isn't the wizard?
Oh, so we're talking like kind of role-playing?
Yeah. So what does a wizard... What feels like a wizard type character in your game?
Oh, okay. So
it's academic in a word.
I think when you look at the wizard in comparison to the sorcerer, which I like more, the wizard is more, like you said, academic. They're more scientific. They're more calculated, whereas the sorcerer is more creative and artistic and wild. So yeah, I would say it's kind of the academic versus artistic for the wizard versus sorcerer. And that's why I think I lean towards the sorcerer more, because I like the more creative side of spellcraft, like as a literal definition of like crafting a spell and using wild magic and creating or like twinning spells. Stuff like that's cool to me. Wizard, it's bookkeeping, and it's, like I said, you're creative in your own way, like a puzzle solving way. But that's, I don't know. That doesn't click with my brain.
The sorcerer is much more of a spell weaver, where they just kind of manipulate things and just kind of like weave things together into an interesting spell. Whereas the wizard is a precise, very specific, like you do this, this, and this, and you get this reaction out of it. It's like you're a chemist.
Kind of Harry Potter.
Yes, it's very Harry Potter. Very that's precise, calculated, and it attracts a different style of player. I would definitely say someone who is more calculated, someone who's more, I have these prepared spells because I'm going to use this one for this exact situation.
Mm-hmm.
So the way I've heard it described, and maybe the player's handbook itself describes it like this, where the sorcerer is born with magic, as we see with the draconic ancestry or the wild magic, and then the wizard is the person. Yeah, and the wizard is a person who has studied all their lives to get to where they are, and they pursue knowledge, which is why I think academic, because this is a person who they're just consumed by this desire for more and more and more power. And I think as a character archetype, that could be really interesting. Because that lust is a great motivator.
Yeah, because they're not inherently magical, but they are inherently ambitious to be the best. Yeah, and genius level intellect. That they're smart and ambitious, which makes for an interesting character concept by itself. You know, because you could easily make a lazy, chaotic, neutral sorcerer that's just kind of silly and, you know, they're kind of pampered almost, or like they've been born lucky. But like a wizard, you kind of have to. You don't have someone who falls into being a wizard. Like you have to kind of.
Yeah. To be fair, you have to have a pretty high IQ to be able to understand the nuances of.
Oh my gosh! Wait, in the real world.
That's the exact reference.
The Rick and Morty wizard.
To be fair, but joking aside, the wizard is a class who they value intelligence, they value knowledge, they value learning, and I think that's something that can really be interesting to see play out in a character who is constantly desiring to know more, and generally probably thinks they know more than most of the population. Based off of what they've achieved.
Here's a question that just came to my mind. What kind of quests would you set in front of a wizard player to get them to go? Like, what makes them want to go out into the world and do stuff?
I think rare knowledge, or like things that they're required to explore. I think this is one of the hardest classes to pull out of their shell. Right, like with a fighter, you can just be like, "There's a war over here," and they're like, "All right, let's go." You know, but with a wizard, it's like it's hard to get them to leave the library, right? Like you got to have a really good logical reason to get a wizard out of their comfort zone, because they learn best when they're in a safe place, a secure, non-dangerous place.
I think to draw a wizard out, you need a good mystery. I think you need some sort of magical enigma in the world that draws them to go and to try to learn and get hands-on rather than just reading books all the time. You want them to get out and exploring and to fiddle with things to see if they can kind of
okay.
manipulate.
I have something that fits kind of with that. So in my universe, in the capital, the main capital city, there is what's called the Arcane University, which is just like, whether you want to call it Hogwarts or whatever, it's just like this school where wizards go to train. And occasionally they'll let sorcerers or monks in to learn different stuff, but it is mainly designed to teach wizards to be the best wizards they can. So the Arcane University is pretty much the only way they can kind of advance through the world as, well-regarded wizards. So at the end of their tenure, at the end of their academic cycle, and before they graduate, they have to do basically a big, like, graduate student field study thing.
Okay.
And that's a way that I can get wizard players or sorcerer players out into the world. Like, they'll be assigned that they have to go do this quest, or they'll be like, retrieve this artifact or transcribe this thing in this faraway land. And that's why it's a way of pulling them out of the university and forcing them into the world. And it's also a way that people will meet wizard NPCs, because they'll say like, oh, I'm on my study journey, like I have to get this thing in order to graduate the Arcane University.
I really like that because it's almost like a thesis, a senior thesis.
Yeah,
or a class
exactly.
Trip or even like a mission trip. I don't know what to call that, but
yeah,
that's it. I love the world building. I'm gonna steal it. So yeah, thanks, Jake.
Yoink.
Anytime.
Mechanically, what are the pros and cons of playing a wizard?
Well, I think Jake already pointed out some of the cons. Being, you have a lot of freaking spells that you have to keep track of.
Yeah.
You have so many options, and if you don't know what your spells do, you're boned.
I think, but that also is a pro, because, like I said earlier, a prepared player almost has a trick up his or her sleeve for any situation as a wizard. And like that, especially at high levels, they can kind of just snap their fingers and make problems go away. And that's not even talking about the wish spell. Like, that is just like a really a testament to their utility.
Yeah, wizards have they have access to so many different spells for any kind of imaginable situation. So the utility of the wizard and what they can bring to a party compared to other very niche, like specific spellcasters like a sorcerer, they provide a lot more just overarching support for the whole team of characters, which is one of the big pros.
So a con is just, it's not for new players, and it's not for just casual players.
Yeah, I think looking at it, the wizard may be second only to the bard, may be the best support class in the game.
Interesting. You're right, because there are so many specializations and ways to play a wizard. I think if you had a party that was made entirely of wizards, but spec'd out in very specific different ways, you could have a really interesting feeling party, because they have even like melee fighting wizards.
The warcaster or
war magic.
War magic, yeah. It's like crowd control mixed with like beefing up your magic armor. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that. Yeah, I actually think that if you have a healer, a wizard is much better utility than a bard.
Huh. I would put it right under a bard, because inspiration is just too good.
Yeah, okay, well, if you think about the divine, like, portent, if you're playing like a divination wizard where you can just give someone a pre-rolled d20 to like automatically make them succeed on a check.
I actually, as much as I hate the concept of like kind of these gamey wizard things that I forget about, that one's really, really, really cool. And we're going to talk about the schools of magic later, but I'm a fan of that idea.
As for being like different than a bard, I think that a bard is almost like a diet wizard in the sense that it solves a lot of the same problems, except it comes with healing as well, but in just a simple mechanical way. Like they do have some spells, but it's a really small list compared to a wizard, and more
all
focused.
Utility, focus.
Yeah, as opposed to a wizard who's like, I could have a familiar and I can warp time or
blast,
portals or whatever.
Yeah, I don't like the one thing I don't like about like the cleric has. Or sorry, not the cleric. The bard has so much utility in that they just never are really bad at anything, especially being high in charisma. They tend to just kind of take over a party at times. With a wizard, oftentimes they don't have very good charisma, so you can have some pretty fun social interactions with them where they just are rude or just
oh my gosh,
mean. And it kind of creates for some good party diversity, not having a class that's just kind of pretty good at everything.
Oh, absolutely. I think an example of this is the character of Caleb in the second campaign of Critical Role. Caleb is a straight up wizard. Like every time they're in town, he's just like, hello, is there any paper I can find? And he's always looking for parchment to write down new spells, and he's always trying to sneak into libraries, and like he is just a quintessential wizard that is not charismatic. He's covered in dirt. Like he's just like this, like, but he doesn't care about that. All he cares about is the pursuit of knowledge. And it's really interesting to see, especially his interplay with the other characters that are quite charismatic. Because he's just honest. He's like, no, I want to go to the library. I want to get as much parchment as I can. I want to look up spells. Like, and it's really cool to see that kind of lack of charisma work, in that type of game. It's really great.
I heard a really interesting discussion about how D&D models charisma or intelligence in the game, because. Okay, so you're playing D&D and you play as a barbarian, and they are incredibly strong, much stronger than you will ever be in your life. And we have no problem saying, oh, he lifts up this boulder, or he cuts this guy in half in one swing. But then for a person let's say a person who has no charisma in real life, or they're very shy. Not to say those things are exactly the same, but
I think they're different.
They are different things. But let's say we have a shy person who really in the game he's supposed to be charismatic, but in real life he doesn't really know how to do that. He or she, or in the reverse, there's a person who's really charismatic in real life, but his character isn't at all. But as soon as we try to model that in the game, it breaks down. So how would you play a wizard who is much more intelligent than the player playing him in D&D? Because I can't think of any way to make that work in a way that seems fair or fun.
You have to become more intelligent. Just read a book, dude.
In the game, every wizard has a spell book they have to carry around. So I got to thinking, what are some interesting, unique spell books? Because frankly, it's kind of boring dragging around this huge tome all day. Yeah. So what are some cool ideas?
I think I would love to see a character with just tattoos of different spells. Tattooed all over their arms and bodies.
Wait, so would the tattoo disappear when you cast it? Or is that like... No, because it's a book, right?
So you would prepare it in the morning, and maybe you tattoo it in the morning on your arm, and then after you've used it, you've expended it.
I'm just imagining someone being like, "Oh, dang, I need that spell," and they wake up early in the morning. They're completely naked, and they're looking through a mirror, looking like the back of their thigh, at like a spell that's back there. They're like, just to memorize it.
Imagine having a weird culture of spellcasters who ritually tattoo spells onto their bodies, and so when you kill them, you can't take their spell books unless you skin them.
Ooh. Or just take their corpse.
Or even if you could have, you carry their corpse around. Or you could have these people hunting the wizard because he's got all these rare high-level spells on him.
And tattooed on him. That's cool.
Yeah, and they're trying to skin him.
Oh my gosh.
That's cool.
That's already like a really cool world building plot hook.
Yeah, that's cool.
Another idea I had was for just carved sticks. So I don't know if that'd be a staff that's just like written all over, or maybe you have just a sack of sticks.
Sack of wands.
A sack of wands, really. And each of them is a different spell. And so you just kind of whip it out and you read it, and that's
whip it out, and then you pull out the wand.
Okay.
Just trying to find one that has any charges left. It's just like,
oh no,
not that one.
It's like,
not that one.
one's...
Not that one.
What else?
So another one would be familiar that recites your spells for you.
Oh, okay.
So I'm imagining just like a pirate wizard with
A parrot
with a
that-
parrot on their
Oh my
shoulder
gosh.
that speaks for them. So the pirate never speaks.
Because he can't read.
Yes.
Yes, he gets around. Oh, okay, that's interesting.
So the real question is the parrot actually the wizard?
I just love the concept of familiars a lot. Like, they are to the point of it almost pushes me, like when I'm playing a rogue, which is one of my favorite classes, to pick the arcane trickster just to get a familiar. Like,
Yeah, there's so many cool things you can do with the familiar. Like, mechanically, there's one where you make your familiar run over to the enemy and just use the assist action every turn.
Oh,
and
yeah.
so everybody gets advantage against that enemy. I don't know what that looks like. Like, there's a dragon with a ferret just like running around it.
I know what that looks like, because I thought of a cool arcane trickster rogue that has a squid that floats through the air. And so the assist action would be the squid, like, boosting over there and then blasting him with ink. And like,
okay.
And I kind of imagine it like the familiar would also be my mage hand. So I'm imagining, instead of pickpocketing from afar with the mage hand, it's just a squid reaching in and pulling out coins from someone's pocket. Like, I just love that concept.
It's kind of a nautical feel.
Yeah.
We should run like a pirate theme campaign where all
I've
the
been
classes.
waiting to play a pirate for so long.
Well, all the classes you could just reflavor to be more oceany
Piratey.
or piratey.
Yes.
You could have the paladin be a representative for the Royal Navy, and so instead of wearing plate, he's wearing like that British Navy uniform.
Admiral,
like,
with the
yeah.
I've been on the
shoulder
seven
pads.
seas.
That's how the British sound.
Just like pirates. So another interesting spell casting style that you could choose would be, you have bottles that you just kind of mix and throw to generate spells.
Oh, it's kind of like an alchemist, but
Yeah.
not exactly.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I don't want to spoil too much of our future bard episode, but this is how I kind of do the bard spells. Like, they can look over the bard spells, which are all kind of utility based, and then figure out how to reflavor that into something that's not actually magical. And I like the idea of a bard being a bard but doesn't have the magic. Like, they just have to do everything with like clockwork devices or oil slick machines or all of the, healing that's actual like medical care. Like, I don't know. I love changing magic to basically appear as magic but actually isn't. And that kind of fits this.
You take all the magic out of D&D. Actually, the ingredients, the spell, whatever, the reagent.
Yeah.
There's a guy online that identified all of them as being just an inside joke that the game designers put in. So I think there's spell Shatter. You need a piece of fool's gold or mica or something, because all you're doing is you're throwing a rock at something to break it. Like, that's the joke.
Well,
yeah, and they're all like that.
So, I mean, kind of going off that, what do you guys think of the verbal, somatic, and what was the other one? Material? Yeah. Do you guys use that?
Not really. Unless, no, I can't think of a time I have. Unless you're wanting to track some resource. I had an idea of having grades of reagents for material spells, and so let's say that you have like the most common one all the time, so you can always cast it, but then in the game you can find very limited uses, like holly berries or something, right?
Oh, yeah.
And they upgrade it like an extra spell slot level until you run out.
So if you're a really good wizard and you're really smart, what you can do is you can start messing with other GM casters by casting things like silence or darkness or restraining them, because doing things like that restricts the spells that NPCs can cast, because you can restrict the verbal components by silencing everyone. Mm-hmm. You can restrict the so if you bind someone, they can't gesture to make spells. So you can do all sorts of things. So it'd be like, oh, I bound him, so he can't actually cast, get out of jail free card.
That's okay. So David, I'm guessing you do use these in your games.
I try to keep track of them, and if they're in my favor, then I bring them up.
Oh my gosh, that's the most David thing I've ever heard.
Because you talk about the game balance, and you kind of abhor my whole concept of just kind of like making them, that sounds about right. But like, I think the verbal, material, somatic, those things are what keep the actual game balanced. Because if you look at like the really high level spells, or the really crazy like teleport spells, or resurrection, which I don't use, but any of those spells, they require like a well cut diamond, or like something that's like very expensive, and I think that does kind of balance it, because it's like, okay, these high level insane spells require some form of either economic sacrifice or 8 hours of your time sacrifice,
Well, in general, a lot of them just require that you to have the diamonds. They don't actually consume them on cast. Only some of them actually burn up the components. Like, for example, I think Identify doesn't actually use the 100 gold pearl. It just requires that you have it.
That's so weird. That is
Whereas
so
things
much
like Resurrection,
bookkeeping.
Yeah.
Like, I'm trying to think of that, like actually using that, like, because I think the component for Fireball is like, I can't imagine looking at my players like I cast Fireball and looking at him being like, do you have several ounces of bat guano? Because that's what's required to cast Fireball. And
well, you can also have a spell focus, which is kind of like it's like a magical
takes
it's
away
a magical
component?
Channel that kind of substitutes 4 components.
See,
You
this
can
just
have
sounds.
a staff that does that and whatnot.
It just sounds like I'm looking at like a video game that I've never played before, and I'm like looking at it, I'm like, okay, I guess that makes sense, but like, I'd have to actually play that game, which I'm clearly not.
I think I'm not sure about this, but I think that the component pouch is like a magical pouch that kind of refills upon
And it has
daily use.
enough pearls and bat guano and infants to sacrifice in order to do your spells.
It's kind of like a mini bag of holding for wizard crap.
Weird. And I guess that's why it's probably so expensive. Yes. Weird. That's so interesting. Like, yeah, because I'm looking at that, I'm like, it's just too much for me. And what's interesting is I have some players that I play with who are very numbers oriented. They like the game design aspect, or like you, David, they like the crunchiness of the game. But even they look at those different, verbal, somatic, or material components and reagents, and they're like, okay, that's a step too far. Like, they're just like, I don't want to keep track of that. Even those type of players are kind of like that takes a very committed player. And I think the one player that did play that played the best wizard in my first campaign, he kept track of that, and he would go to stores and he'd be like, "Can I get a lizard's tail?" And I'd be like, "What?" He's like, "It's for a spell." I'd be like, "Okay, that's 2 gold," and yeah, and that's just a feat of its own to be able to look at that and be like, "Yeah, I want to keep track of that too." Like, that's a whole nother aspect.
What I would do is I would only do it for new spells that you either create or give to the player, because then it's like, oh, you have to go out and get the resources to be able to cast it. But once you have the resources, like, you don't have to track it.
Yeah, it's kind of fiddly, but I think if you were running a very specific kind of game, or even a game with just one player, you could make a little quest out of like, oh, you have to go out and find all the lizard tails to cast whatever. But then I don't think that in general that's very fun or interesting. So there's a video series that's just recently on YouTube where this guy is called the Animated Spellbook, and he talks all about different spells. And he said he had an adventure where the players were fleeing from a pursuing enemy, and I think the wizard could cast Goodberry, and he wanted it to be like a survival game, so Goodberry gives you enough food for 5 people, I think, for a day, but it takes 1 holly berry to cast. And so he made them actually have to go out and find holly berries to survive. And so he enforced it on this one spell, and he said it made the whole campaign really interesting because it wasn't just this automatic, oh, I solved the problem, and it didn't cost me anything because I'm a wizard.
Yeah, weird.
But in general, I wouldn't enforce such a thing.
So going back to kind of what we were talking about earlier, kind of the thematic twists for like what a spell book could be. I love the idea. I've kind of pondered using it with maybe a warlock, or even maybe a paladin's oath, but like someone from the future coming into the past and saying like, I need you to do this thing. And so it kind of works better maybe as a warlock patron, but I like the idea of their wizard spells coming from kind of a future being, or like they get their spells from, I don't know, some maybe not necessarily future tech, but like magic learned in the future, and so the wizard,
or even like someone's appearing to them in their dreams. And they're like trying to guide them,
and that's where they're getting their
yeah. That's so cool. I love that.
That is cool. What if when you level up, you just get an owl drops a letter in your lap with a bunch of scrolls that have all of your new spells on them?
Oh my gosh! So you just have this like weird hidden benefactor who's just kind of like coaching
spooky and weird
from like nowhere.
So I think looking at the wizard, I think they are perhaps the easiest class to be able to roleplay leveling up really well, because they're literally learning new spells. And so you could explain how perhaps they found their new spell, or how they learned it, whether it was some weird owl dropping it in their lap, or a future benefactor coming through a portal, or just, them writing down their new spells. I think with other classes, it's hard to think about how a fighter, who's traveling suddenly learns a new battle master maneuver. But like with a wizard, like you could really justify them maybe transcribing something they found, or just simply rolling an intelligence check or an arcana check as they're reading a book and then learning a new spell. Like I think it really gives a lot of ways to roleplay the getting better at what you do aspect of D&D.
So this gives me an idea for a type of wizard where you kind of get around the specific structure of leveling up your wizard and getting all these spell slots at intervals, where instead the wizard has to find some magical artifact, like just any magical artifact, and they bundle it up or teleport it away or send it off to their school or their lab, and then they get a research spell in the mail back to them. And so they're constantly learning new stuff that's not tied to level progression. Like they're getting new slots and new stuff.
Yeah, I love that type of game where progression is tied to the story and it's not tied to, I've hit 600 XP and now there's the little bar above my head dings and there's a little bit of fireworks and I have new spells.
Yeah, kind of weird.
It is. It's very MMO-esque.
Yeah.
Well, it can be, but I mean, D&D is a game, or at least something like a game at the end of the day, and so I don't know how to really track, unless you're doing the Elder Scrolls thing where you do specific skills to level up in them, and even then you're still tracking a number that's going up kind of arbitrarily. So I don't know if there's a solution yet. All right, the last idea I had for a unique spell book is what I call the gambit, and that's just a deck of cards that the wizard hauls around.
Oh, yeah.
So you just like throw them out, and then a spell flashes into existence. I don't know how that would work, because it seems kind of like you're just throwing spell scrolls at people, which is not wise.
That seems awesome.
Oh my
maybe
gosh.
like one parchment paper of a spell scroll, you cut into like 6 cards.
I would love if you were an actual magician. So you're just like
a black and white wand,
yes,
and a top hat.
You have a rabbit that lives in your hat.
That's your familiar.
Oh my gosh. Boy. See, I was thinking the opposite. I was thinking a barbarian that is wielding just 2 spell scrolls that he's just hitting people with.
He like makes them into gloves and punching people.
And just like little poofs of magic come out.
Like he read the scroll and it said like, oh, this causes fire damage. He was like, okay, and he just rolls up the scroll and starts hitting people with it.
That's not how it works. It's a barbarian with 1 level of wizard. Like, how would that work?
That's great.
He can barely read a scroll. All right, so I want to move into schools of magic, because there are I believe 8 of them.
Yes.
Let's just go through them and talk about kind of what you get from them.
Oof. Okay.
David, would you start us off?
Yeah. So the first school of magic, we have abjuration, which is kind of just warding, arcane defense.
Okay.
Yeah. It's going to be a lot more combat focused, and it's going to be a lot more on the physical aspect of combat, shields, things like that.
So this is backing up just for a second. Is it level 3 that you get to choose your specialization?
It's actually at level 2, which you get to choose your specialization.
Well, that's even better. So if you're abjuration, then is this for like a melee kind of caster? It seems odd to me.
Kind of. So you can go melee with wizard. It's not the best.
Not recommended.
Not recommended, but it is. It's just more of a. I actually haven't done a lot with the abjuration tree.
To me, this seems like you would go into this. You just take 2 levels of wizard to get the shield spell, the arcane ward.
Oh yeah,
and then the rest of your class is a fighter or some other melee class.
Yeah,
because this is like a +2 AC bump, I think, with that ward.
Something like that. Yeah.
So is mage armor an abjuration spell?
That's a great question. Mage armor is an abjuration.
Yes.
Spell.
Okay. Well, yeah, I guess that makes sense because it's all.
Aha! I know my stuff.
No, I like this kind of magic. It makes me think of Violet's superpower from The Incredibles, like just kind of shield based, kind of without the invisibility, but like the making barriers, which can be done in really creative ways.
I also like to think of Doctor Strange when he has his little like defense shields.
Yeah. That he can kind of move around.
That's very abjuration-y.
So just to make sure that our fans don't cry foul, the actual rules for the Arcane Ward, it gives you temporary hit points equal to twice your wizard level plus your intelligence modifier. So that is a pretty minor little bump in health.
That's whenever you cast an abjuration spell at first level or higher.
Yeah, so it's just a small buffer whenever you're casting spells. So as long as you're casting, then you are just more tough, which is pretty cool.
Getting, yeah.
So you, as a wizard, God, this shows how much I don't even know what the wizard is. Do you get 2 or 3 or 1? How many of these schools of magic do you get to pick?
You get one school of magic.
Okay.
So this is like your specialization. So imagine when you go to university, you pick a major.
Okay.
This is your major in the arcane world. So the first one is abjuration, and then the next one would be conjuration.
And what does that mean?
So conjuration is summoning. It's kind of like your.
See, I know this.
It's your dimensional manipulation. Is what I would say.
I want to hear your.
I know this from the Oblivion, Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion. Because conjuration was just the easiest thing to level up because I think you got points in it, like XP from just summoning creatures over and over. And so you kind of just switch over and like summon this weird feral hell beast that followed you around, and you would get just XP for it following you around or something like that. I may be wrong, but I remember leveling up that conjuration. So conjuration, this one really, the word brings a vivid picture to my mind as opposed to abjuration, which just sounds like a silly fake word. But like conjuration is like, I'm thinking portals. I'm thinking just basically summoning creatures, like not necessarily necromancy, but like
summoning items. Yeah.
Planes of existence, connecting and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right. And I think it's a really cool class. One of the it has some really cool features just in the level abilities. So the first one is you can create an inanimate object at level 2, which is just it lasts for I think for an hour.
Wait, so that's not an illusion?
No, it's not. It
a
has
real thing.
It has a magical aura, but it's just
it disappears after an hour, but it's a real
tangible.
Thing.
It's
weird.
like a real
So you could like conjure a diamond and like sell it to a shopkeeper.
Yeah, but it has like a magical aura, so you'd be able to tell.
Like even an untrained eye would tell. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, it's visibly magical, radiating dim light. I see.
Yes.
Oh,
you say, I found a magical diamond, shopkeeper. Buy it from me.
I mean, you could, but
you give it to the bard and just have him roll.
And then the other feature I like is the transposition, where you can you have a quick little teleport as a feature, not even a spell, that you can just teleport.
Oh.
You can swap places with another creature.
Up to 30 feet away.
Yes.
That's powerful. So if you get surrounded by a bunch of monsters in combat, you just cast your thing.
So if you're surrounded and the paladin's far away, you just swap with the paladin.
Oh my
and now
gosh.
the paladin's in the middle of
that's
all
so
the enemies.
slippery and cool.
I feel like I am just in class and I'm learning so many cool new things. I'm like, okay.
Oh, wizards are actually cool.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of really cool things in the wizard. And the next one is probably the most powerful. It is the
Divination.
Divination.
Okay, so this one, Jake, you're gonna love.
Okay.
It has. We kind of talked about this earlier. Portent, and it says when you finish a long rest, so you wake up, yawn and stretch and blink, and then you roll 2 d20s and you write down the numbers, and then you can replace any attack, roll, saving throw, or ability check, which, as far as I know, is any roll in D&D, with one of those. So if a monster crits you, you say no, and you swap out his crit with the 2 that you rolled that morning.
Yeah.
Whoa.
So he misses the attack.
That's incredible.
So I imagine it as you're just playing this character who's just getting glimpses of reality, like as they're dreaming, and then when they wake up, they go and they're about to make the mistake that they would have made, and then they dodge out of it.
It's almost like
that's
a
cool.
quantum wizard where you see all the possibilities, but you can only move around so many a day.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Okay,
that's
so
really cool.
so I have in my games, I have a kind of school of magic. It's mainly used for like a main NPC for kind of the Rise of Tiamat homebrew I have. That he kind of sees the future. Would he technically? I called it chronomancy. Is that technically the same thing as divination?
Divination.
Okay.
Yes, probably.
It was like time magic and like being able to look at it predicts probabilities and look around at like possible timelines. I think that this sounds a lot like it.
Yeah. It makes me want to play a wizard just so I can have those d20s.
Yeah.
Then I would play as a halfling, so I'm lucky and I can.
Oh my god! Wait, does the lucky feat apply to your portent?
I don't think so, because I think it's
that wouldn't make
a little
sense.
differently.
Yeah.
God,
but
that would
it's
be
still
insane. Okay, yeah,
It's still good. Yeah.
absolutely.
So the next school we have is enchantment.
Oh yes.
So enchantment is all about charming people and manipulating the willingness
It's a mind tricks. It's Jedi mind tricks at the school.
of other creatures. It's messing with people's minds. It's probably one of the weaker wizard.
It seems to be.
schools.
It seems like it's kind of like illusion, but like focused only on like characters.
It's illusion, but worse. Yeah. Definitely. I would definitely say that. So it's all about playing a character that is charismatically manipulating people without being charismatic.
Yeah, I'm reading through it now. It doesn't like they have an ability called like they can hypnotize people, which is like whatever in melee range. But at 6th level, when somebody tries to attack you, you can make them do a spell save, and then they have to attack somebody else. But then compare that to teleporting away 30 feet. I think that's just faster and better. So yeah,
I'm imagining a really interesting like very diplomatic political intrigue game, almost like a Curse of Strahd campaign with an enchantment wizard, and I feel like that could be really cool.
And this could be also cool as a multi-class dip
for like a warlock or something.
Yeah, so that way you have access to these really powerful mind control things. But then you could just take the spells for suggestion and anyway, there's other mind control spells, and then you don't have to waste your levels.
I think
I don't know how I feel about it.
A lot of this depends on like what your spell save is, or not your spell save, or I guess technically your spell save, but like your main stat. And like for this, like enchantment seems like your main stat should be charisma, but it's actually intelligence, and it's basically like turning your intelligence into charisma, which is kind of weird. But I don't know. Like I said, I feel like this could be really cool for like a political intrigue, like Game of Thrones, like game,
or even just having a group of people, like maybe a faction, and all of them are at least 2nd level enchantment wizards, and so nobody can get near them because they just enchant them into leaving, so they've never been attacked, and they live like
and no one can really explain why.
Exactly. We don't really want to attack them, and we don't know why. We go in and then we always leave.
That's actually there's a plot hook there.
Yeah, dude, there's always plot hooks. Next we have the School of Evocation.
Oh, okay, this is what my wizard was.
Okay, I would consider this the bread and butter wizard class, and by that I mean it's very elemental focused. You're focusing on spells that are like fireball. They're gonna be like lightning bolt, flame strike, Firebolt. You have all of these
Butter
spells
blast.
which are very
That's the school of
baking.
pastry school.
pastry school.
That's in
Get
Xanathar.
pasted, kid.
Okay.
This class is one of the default wizards that you probably gonna find in your games, and it's pretty good. It does pretty good damage when you look at their abilities. They get some bonuses to damages and to spell saves and things like that.
Okay, I'm just reading through here and I'm getting so excited. So, they get the ability to sculpt spells. So let's say you throw a fireball into a group of your friends. You can just make that spell mold itself to not affect them, which is super cool. At 6th level, you can boost up your cantrips. Basically, saving throws no longer save for half. They're just going to take damage. But the best one is called Overchannel. That's when you cast a spell at level 1 to 5. You just deal maximum damage with the spell.
Whoa, was that like you do that once a day or what? That's insane.
The first time you do so, it has no adverse effects. But if you use it again before you finish a long rest, you take 2d12 necrotic damage immediately after you cast it.
For each level of the spell.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's so cool.
So you could push in and just start killing yourself, which I definitely would do.
I would
talked about
too.
the Warlock in World of Warcraft that hurts himself. This is that, which I freaking love.
Yeah.
Wow.
But you gotta be level 14, so that's kind of rough. I might actually give them an item that does that.
So I'm thinking of like, isn't the highest spell that I can think of, like damage wise, like both visually and what I know from the 5e spell list, is like Meteor Storm? Is that evocation?
It probably would
It's
be.
like a
I can't
ninth
think of
level.
another school that it would be. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the
Let's look.
huge AoE damage though.
Meteor Storm.
Dude, D&D Beyond is like so good.
Yeah, I was surprised because they pushed it really hard, which from like a PR standpoint, I'm like, okay. But then I'm like, oh, okay, all right, okay.
Meteor Swarm.
This message is brought to you by D&D Beyond, which are not sponsors, but we would love for them to be.
Please sponsor us.
I'm begging you.
So Meteor Storm is a 9th level spell. It's got a range and area of 1 mile, a 1 spherical mile. That's crazy. And then every creature, dexterity saving throw. A creature takes 20 d6 fire damage and 20 d6 bludgeoning damage.
On a failed save.
On a failed
and then
save.
half as much on a successful one.
Whoa!
That's
great.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Like evocation, because you get 9th level spells for a wizard. What at level 18, 19?
Yeah, it's pretty high up. You're basically done with the game at that point.
Yeah, you're entering demigod status, and so I think when most people think of a wizard, they think of evocation. Like they think of that type of damage dealing, like glass cannon blaster in the back.
It's funny because I would almost call it elementalism. There's a board game I love called Wiz War, and they have elemental.
Oh,
and this is more in line with that.
And I think this is the closest one. Maybe why I like it so much is I think this is the closest one to the sorcerer. Like, 'cause it's kind of more damage focused, and it's more about kind of like gambling with your spells or making your spells do different things and kind of being creative with them. And it's mostly damage and mostly offensive. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So next we have what I think is one of the most interesting schools, and schools for the most creative players. It's the School of Illusion.
Ooh, yes, yeah. I agree.
So this school is all about just manipulating how people see reality and what other people can see and making it come to fruition. The spells that you can do there's so much that you can do with them, and it's just up to you to be creative in how you manipulate these spells and abuse them for your power.
Yeah, I think these are perfect for my type of game, which are normally more diplomacy based or social, because you can like use these illusions to just add to your web of lies that you're stringing, and it's so cool.
And and you can scare people away by just having a fake minotaur just show up out of nowhere. And there's so many cool role playing aspects with the illusion that it's it's one of the best.
So
it opens
go
up
ahead.
some weird potential because you get minor illusion just for taking the school. You have the ability to change them and do weird things. But at 14th level, you get illusory reality, which means your illusions have a semi-reality. It says, when you cast an illusion spell at first level or higher, you choose one inanimate, non-magical object, and you make that object real. And it remains real for 1 minute. So you could, I don't know if you could summon a minotaur or something, or an axe. But then if you combine that with a spell called Hallucinatory Terrain, which is only a 4th level spell, you could put enemies into like a terrifying nightmare maze, and you could make parts of it real, and they just get trapped and lose their
They would
mind and
assume
die.
the rest is real too. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So-
So you could do some really twisted stuff.
I was thinking of this, and I'm thinking like illusion magic kind of fits with like more of a rogue or a warlock, but then I was thinking like, what does this look like at higher levels? And that just answered my question. Like that's so cool.
Yeah, the ability to just completely just manipulate what reality looks like. I'm just thinking Doctor Strange when
Yeah.
he's manipulating like how
The mental-
how the streets are just bending upwards and there's just like fractal like crystal imagery everywhere. Like this is that, and if that appeals to you, be an illusionist. Now I will say that this class does take a higher level of creativity than any other of the wizard subclasses, and you really have to push yourself in order to get the most out of this class. Otherwise it's not going to be as good as say evocation or the divination.
No, I think that makes sense because like when you get a spell called Fireball, basically what you do is aim where you want the fireball to hit, right?
Mm-hmm.
With this, it's like you can make anything. It's like, oh my gosh, like you are literally unrestricted with what, like it's unlimited creativity.
Yeah.
And wow, yeah, just
I
insane.
think that this would probably work better in a combat as war game because, like, let's say you have an army charging across the battlefield to you, and you cast something that makes them think they're walking through a swamp, right? And they slow down, they react, and then you just trick them into weakness, and then you kill them. In a lot of ways, if the school of evocation is giving you a fireball, it's like giving you a tool that makes sense and you know how to use it, right? Like they give you a hammer, you know how to use a hammer. But the school of illusion is like they give you a plumbus. And you're like, well, what do I do with this?
Well,
I
how
don't
does
know if
this
is the right
work?
Tool.
It's like just
So it's
plumb.
up to you to figure out how to
And
use
then you touch the plumbus and it wasn't even real.
So I think a huge example of this on a large scale is at the start of the first season of Critical Role. There, someone casts an illusion magic. There's like this big chasm, and there's a huge army running at them, and all they do is make the chasm look a little bit smaller than it actually is.
Oh my
And so,
gosh.
like, half the army just falls into the chasm because they thought the cliff was like 4 feet farther than it actually was. And it fits into the whole combat as war. Like, you have to do these tricks in order to make the fight more fair. And, like, it's
That's
just
amazing.
so cool. Yeah.
Oh, I just want to play an illusion wizard now.
I want to
so
play
bad.
all of the wizards now.
I just never want to play a class other than a wizard.
God, it's hard for me to admit, but these are pretty cool.
Yeah, these are pretty darn cool.
All right, and then
The next one is the School of Necromancy.
School of Death. This is the class. This is the school that you pick if you want to be the Lich King.
So, okay, how does this work? I've never seen this. Like, is it really restricted? Is it really like, oh, you only get one zombie that can follow you around? Or is it like you have an army of undead? Or do you just like resurrect only what you've killed? Like, how does this work?
So I'm looking through on D&D Beyond because this is so great. Looks like at second level you get the ability to just steal life energy from creatures you kill. So you're healing yourself as you kill things. At sixth level you get Animate Dead, but it's just the spell on your spell book. And then when you cast it, you get to target one additional corpse or pile. So it looks like
Pile?
a pile of bones.
Yeah. And then when you create,
So that's two servants. So the spell is twice as good. But it also increases their max hit points and adds your proficiency to their damage rolls. So that's actually pretty good.
Yeah.
Like at 6th level, you automatically will always have 2 zombies or skeletons or a combination, just boning around. At 10th level, you're resistant to necrotic damage. Your
That's
max hit
really
points can't
good.
be reduced. That's interesting.
Wow, those are really, especially for like if you look at like Out of the Abyss campaigns or Tomb of Annihilation, like
the maximum hit point drain is like
yeah,
a really
and
serious
like
threat, but
necrotic
not
damage
this
is just omnipresent throughout those. Like weird.
Oh, okay. At 14th level, you command undead, which lets you bring undead under your control, even those created by other wizards. So you just target any undead, and they make a charisma saving throw, and if they fail, you control them now. So you just could find a place with a lot of undead, and you just control them, and now you have an army of undead to do whatever you want, and that's crazy.
So is there any limit to the amount?
Well, that's not exactly true because it says, and it obeys you until you use this feature again. So you use it on one, and then you use it again on a different one, and that one falls away.
That's kind of lame.
And
then they make a saving throw every hour if they're smart enough.
Yeah.
So, but then in that case, you would want to go find a big beefy boy.
Big beefy boy. So, yeah, I think that the necromancer, I think it might be a little weak from what I've seen, but otherwise I love the flavor of the necromancy wizard, just having just a bunch of skeletons follow you around, just carrying around your books and such, and just the looks that you get as you're walking down the street with just these blatant, just undead, decaying bodies, and just imagining the villagers just reacting like, why do you have those creatures with you?
That's just a lot of attacks per turn, because you could still take like find familiar, and then have that take the form of some undead thing.
Yeah.
And then you have your attack plus the 3 things following you around. Like that's like a little army. Like that's in some parties that could be doubling the size of the party.
Wow.
So I think in the hands of a clever player, you really could do some creepy, gross, and very cool stuff.
Yes, you get a lot of extra manpower.
Or bone power.
All right, what's next?
And then
this is the second to last one.
No, this is the last one.
Well, counting Xanathar's, yeah.
So this is the last one in the official player's handbook, and it is the School of Transmutation.
You modify energy and matter.
Yes, so this is turning one thing into another. This is turning all sorts of fun, like wood into stone or into lead or silver or gold. It's all about manipulating and turning and shifting
weird.
things.
Yeah,
into
I'm
different
lost.
things.
So is this is different than conjuration or enchantment or illusion?
Yeah, so it's
just
second
kinda...
level. It says you can temporarily alter the physical properties of one object. So you spend 10 minutes doing it, and you can turn something that's like made of entirely of stone or wood or anything, any solid material, and you change it into a different material. But then after an hour, it turns back into what it was. So I don't know if that's...
So imagine turning a stone wall into dirt and then being able to dig through it.
That's actually pretty cool.
That is super cool, but I feel like does this not break the everything?
It could.
Well, 10 minutes.
It could. And then at 6th level, you get what's called the Transmuter's Stone. So you create a Transmuter Stone that stores transmutation magic, and then you can gain the benefit yourself or give it to another creature. And then you get all sorts of cool benefits for having this thing.
You choose one of the features for your stone. Dark vision, 60 feet. Move 10 more feet faster. Okay. Increase your speed by 10 feet. You get proficiency in constitution saving throws or resist an element of your choice. One element.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can only have one at a time. So that's kind of cool. So you just choose what buff you want that day. It's 8 hours. That's cool. It's like you make a little magic item. And I think if you worked with your GM, he'd probably let you do other things.
Yeah.
Like even having feather fall on you all the time. Like that's not totally powerful, but it's something you might want in certain campaign. Next, at 10th level, you get polymorph, which is nice.
And then you can cast polymorph without expending a spell slot.
But only on yourself.
Mm-hmm. And then you can transmute into just small beasts. So you're basically a druid now.
Like a really lightweight druid. which could be useful in getting away, I guess.
I imagine this kind of wizard is just kind of a weird, odd. I mean, this fits into the aloof wizard, I think.
Yeah, I'm seeing a guy like turn a stone wall into dirt, and he turns around and looks at you and just says like, "Shh,"
and then turns into a sparrow,
and then flies away. Yeah, and everybody's like, "Who is that guy? He's not in our party." Okay, 14th level, you can consume your stone into a burst. Okay, so your stone explodes into a major transformation, so you turn something into something else.
So you could transmute one non-magical object no longer than a 5-foot cube into another non-magical object of similar size and mass and of equal lesser
Okay, so you
value.
could just... But it's permanent.
Yes.
That's weird. So I could turn like a bunch of iron ore into gold ore permanently. Like that's...
of lesser value.
Equal or lesser. Dang it.
Yeah.
Dang it,
so you
rules
could turn
writers.
I don't
you
think
could
we're-
turn
yeah.
so you could turn like a block of wood into just a big block of stone.
But unless it's worth more, David.
God, this has been a
No.
roller
Because
coaster
stone's
for
about
me.
the same.
Like of just like
So
that's
what-
really cool. And then I go, oh yeah, I remember why I hate the wizard.
So what I'm imagining is you just have someone just holding a big block of wood, and then the wizard turns it to stone, and they just drop it on someone, or lead.
But then, so you're like, I'm gonna carry all this bag full of wooden blocks, and then I'll change them into stone, and we'll drop it. Like that's, maybe a clever person can make this work well, but okay, that's just one of the things. Or you can explode your stone to remove all curses, diseases, and poisons afflicting a creature you touch, and also heals them to full health. So that's great. It's like a ultimate potion. Or you can explode it to restore life. It casts Raise Dead on a creature you touch. That's actually useful. It requires no spell slot.
And then
The last one is called Restore Youth. Okay, the last one is Restore Youth. You just turn their age back in time.
so you just get younger.
We had a cleric that fought a ghost in 2 campaigns ago, and he was aged 40 years in one combat.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, what do I do? Because he went from being like 50 years old to being an old, feeble man. And I was like, I don't know how to turn you back. Okay, finally we've arrived at the last one. This is from Xanathar's Guide. It's called War Magic, and this is just your quintessential melee type wizard. So if you don't like fighters and you don't like any of the other melee classes, you could be a wizard with War Magic.
I love this concept apply, like, because this fits into world building. Like I like the idea of like legions of soldiers from whatever empire is in charge, like having, every 50 soldiers, they have one warcaster that is like assisting the troops and doing crowd control. And like, I don't know, I love how this fits into, I mean, like it says on the tin, war. Like these people, it can fit like a soldier background of like a wizard being involved in conflicts throughout the continent. Like, I don't know, this one really, I like this. There's a lot of hooks.
This is cool. Just really quickly, they get an AC bonus, which makes sense. Otherwise, you're just going to die on one hit. You get Tactical Wit, which lets you add your initiative to rolls, or add your intelligence to initiative rolls.
That's cool.
Yeah, makes sense to me. It seems weird that there's no other classes that do that. This one I like. At 6th level, you can store magical energy in yourself. Oh, it's called a Power Surge. Whenever you cast a spell, magic, or counterspell, you gain a surge, and you can use that surge to deal damage. So that's cool because it encourages you to constantly be dispelling or counterspelling, which has a nice war battlefield feel. So that is all of the specializations for the wizard. Whew, we made it.
What a roller coaster. Because I'm seeing like why I've neglected the wizard. I'm like, okay, that could be great, and then also why I hate the wizard. And I'm like, oh, okay.
It's a mixed bag. I think there's definitely some specializations that I would gravitate toward. Transmutation probably I wouldn't, but I think I want to play Necromancer.
All right, so we've agreed that the wizard is perfect and needs no improvement.
Yeah.
So really quickly, I want to touch on another universe and how they handle magic. That's the Warhammer fantasy world. I thought it was really unique, so I've included it here. So in Warhammer, magic comes from a portal that goes into, I guess, this magical space and time, like terrifying realm, and all of the different kinds of magic flow out of it and down into the world. So there's all the different, instead of schools of magic, you have the winds of magic, and different people can tap into that wind, but it's really dangerous. And so they're all different colors, and they all represent different things. And so they have the white wind is like the lore of light. So whereas D&D would have the schools we just listed, light is going to be more like your holy and divine magic, I think. I'm not a Warhammer fantasy expert, so just correct me if I'm wrong, but this is as I understand it. The blue wind is the lore of the heavens, which maybe that's divine. You see, I don't really know what I'm talking about. Yellow is metal. They have a type of magic that's just relating to metal, which I think is really weird. It's also important to note that in Warhammer, because magic is so volatile and unstable, the more you use it, the more your person takes on the form of that type of magic. So a wizard who's been using the lore of metal their whole life, the yellow wind, eventually their body starts to turn into metal. And so imagine a high-level wizard in a like a dolly being wheeled around the battlefield by his apprentices so he can cast like his high-powered spells. Really weird stuff. The green wind is the lore of life, which makes sense. I think of more like druid stuff. However, there's also the brown wind. Sounds kind of funny when you say it.
Okay, yeah, I mean, come on.
The joke must be made. The brown wind is the lore of beasts, and I don't really know why they separate it out like that, but beast school, totally weird, totally unique. I'm going to
beast school, dudes.
Red wind. David, can you guess which wind the red wind represents?
Fire. Blood.
Yeah.
Oh,
well, actually, no, it's just fire. Then the gray wind, this is sort of necromantic. It's shadow and just spooky, scary stuff. And purple, maybe purple.
Wait, hold on. You said necromantic? Is that really?
Necromantic.
Oh my gosh.
English is a language that new words are added to every year, Jake.
That's added into my Twitter bio.
Necromantic. So maybe I was wrong. So the purple wind is the lore of death, and the gray wind is the lore of shadow. It seems like they kind of go together. But once again, like the more you tap into it, the more you become that. So imagine a necromancer, just by using that, they become more undead,
deathly decayed,
and look like death. Yeah, or even shadow. Like this shadow wizard transforms into something that's no longer like totally physical. It's just more of
spicy.
I like the idea of magic affecting you physically and like having repercussions, because like magic, kind of how David you were saying, like it's kind of like a science. It almost feels like a cop out. You can just be like bibbity bobbity boo and like do all these crazy things without any like kind of physical repercussions. To your mind or body.
Very, very Harry Pottery in that it's very sterile, controlled, and known thing. Whereas in Warhammer, it's like you are trading your life and well-being to tap into this really wild force. And I love that, because I like having magic be more dangerous. I think we've talked about Eberron. It's a D&D setting, and magic is ubiquitous and it's everywhere. So in that world, you'll see necromancers who have enchanted the dead bodies of whoever has died recently, and they're pulling the plows on the farms. Because it's just everywhere, and that's life.
You have cities just full of undead doing all the labor.
Doing menial labor. And I don't know if I like that, because I like having magic be more mysterious and dangerous.
Yes, and spicy.
And spicy, as David says.
If everything's spicy, then nothing is.
Imagine a world where every single food was spicy. Even breakfast.
Oh no.
Okay, so
it's like, this habanero breakfast cereal.
So now that we've finished wizards, which I don't know if I still think they're them yet. I don't think they're the worst class, but I think a lot of the wizards have kind of been redeemed for me. I've learned a lot. I feel like I've sat in a classroom and learned what a wizard actually is, because I was just stubborn and being like, wizards. But what do you guys think of, like, are some cool character concepts for wizards, like that are unique, that aren't just like, oh, I studied and I want to be good at shooting fire? Like that are really unique things.
So, compared to my ideas that I had for the last class thing we did, I think we did fighters.
Yeah.
I don't really have any that come to mind beyond what we've already talked about. But I do like the way Diablo 3 handled their wizard and their backstory. This was a person who was just very talented, very gifted, just born with it. Maybe she's born with it.
Maybe it's Maybelline.
There's some things you can say in a room of people that they will respond with the right line, and that's one of them. So yeah, she's born with it, and she goes away to an academy, and she finds that no instructor can challenge her, and everything is easy. And so there's nothing, like, it's boring for them, and so they actually go out into the world just to find a challenge, because they are just awesome and amazing even at level 1. So that is my concept. It's based on the wizard.
I love pirate wizards.
Pirate wizard.
So
what a strange universe we live in that someone can say that. I'm
Can we
so
clip
happy.
that out and just have it as my ringtone for David?
I love pirate wizards. Wow, I'm glad that this universe exists, that you can say that.
So
this is the dankest timeline.
So let me explain. So I'm just imagining this character who grew up on the seas, and as they've been traveling around the world, they've been gathering these scraps of knowledge and slowly learning and improving themselves and being able to cast spells. And they just continue to sail the high seas, stealing information from people who are traveling around the world, carrying these valuable books, and they're just gathering the knowledge as they rob these intellectuals of their knowledge in order to get stronger themselves.
I know how I would do that. You would have like this little ship's cabin boy who finds maybe he finds that parrot in a cave, and he thinks it's just a pet, but then it can talk to him, and it's teaching him spells over time. And so that's why he's not just instantly like level 9, is because he has to just like learn the vocabulary and be educated. And maybe he's finding magical artifacts, like you have a cutlass or something. I think that this would work really well for a war magic type, because you are that swashbuckling hero.
Oh yeah.
But you have spells, which that's really exciting to me.
I think my answer to this question originally, like all my concepts I'm thinking of kind of just turn into sorcerers. But I think I really, really love the idea of a necromancer that is lawful good. And like just having really like paragon of virtue type character that just is a necromancy wizard. And I really like the concept of like trying to overcome that
stigma.
Yeah, that stigma. And it would also kind of, to echo that stigma even more, maybe make the character like a half-orc or a tiefling or even a drow. Like something where it's like, it's just double racism / stigma / you kind of are judged by everyone. Because imagine, you think of like a drow necromancer. It's like evil, right? But trying to make a lawful good character that is like, a drow or a tiefling necromancer. Like, I don't know. I find that really intriguing.
It would be interesting even to have an NPC, if you couldn't get this concept off the ground, who has their undead servants sort of dressed up in disguise like people. So it just looks like they're traveling through the city, always with the same entourage that kind of smells bad. But they're really a person in hiding who's protected with this really strange magic that no one recognizes.
Oh, I'm just imagining it's just they're wearing shades and it's like Weekend at Bernie's.
And you always try to talk to them, and they're always just like,
oh, that's Ralpho. Don't talk to him. He's real tired right now.
It's kind of the twist from The Prestige, right? Like the assistant really is the magic.
Oh my gosh. Okay, that is incredible. Like having like an obvious wizard with like two skeletons walking behind, but the actual wizard is like the skeleton to the left. It's in an illusion.
Oh, that's and then like you cast Magic Mouth on the real the quote unquote wizard, the zombie, and so everyone thinks they're talking to you, but it's essentially a puppet. And so maybe one day somebody like assassinates the wizard,
the throat,
but they don't die, right? Like that's the thing, is you can't kill this wizard.
Yeah.
Oh, and then the skeleton just like suddenly turns into the actual wizard. That is so cool.
Okay, I'm in. Jake, I'm gonna give yours the nod. I really love it.
Seal of approval. Boom.
Oh. We're doing a new segment this week. Hopefully we'll do one each week. This is our mailbag. Our listeners are writing in, and they're just too good to pass up. So
reach into the bag of holding.
I reach into the mailbag of holding, and I pull out a letter from Bryant B. He says, quote, Hey, I was wondering how you felt about foreshadowing boss fights. I had my players at level 1 meet a level 8 boss and 4 level 5 minions. It was supposed to simulate a party wipe, but having it planned, I dropped the leader of the guild they worked for on top of them after they were all down. Down meaning
Knocked out.
unconscious.
KO'd.
Looking at my players' reaction to the story, some were okay or excited. Excited how I did it, while others seemed mad. What's your take on this? So it sounds like he orchestrated a party wipe for sort of a cinematic moment, kind of that video game thing where oh, there's no hope, and then you're rescued at the last second.
Okay.
So, I have thoughts on this. So, I think that foreshadowing and doing stuff like this can be really cool, and it can have really nice payoffs later on. But I don't know if I necessarily agree with killing the party right away.
No,
for lack of a better word. So, I just want to like kind of explain how I feel as a player when this happens to me. Is if I go up against something which I'm not meant to defeat, it kind of discourages me as a player from playing, because it's not something that is meant to be beat. It's not meant to be interacted with. It's just I'm supposed to sit there and let it happen.
it's almost a form of railroading because your players don't have a chance or a choice or an option of doing anything other than losing.
It is, but it is masqueraded in a system that feels like you can do stuff. Because in combat, if you go up against something, you assume that you're going to be able to defeat it by overpowering it. But in this combat scenario, you are clearly not meant to.
Oh,
which it feels bad.
So I'm on Team Brian right here. So I think, like I've said many times, Dungeons and Dragons is this weird dance between the players and the dungeon master, and you have to really communicate, what the game is, what the themes are, how the structure is, and the players have to give feedback. They can't just go and text amongst themselves like, oh, our DM is an idiot. There needs to be a good dialogue. And so for me, I've done this on several occasions. And it's worked really, really well because my players have accepted some degree of railroading from me because they trust my plot. Now I understand it's almost not a game at that point. It's almost like, hey, the DM's telling a story. Let's sit down and listen. As opposed to okay, maybe if we, just swing on the chandelier and hit him just right and coordinate everything, we can kill the final boss right when we meet him, and it's I think my players have enough faith in me as a DM that when that happens, they trust the narrative process that I've created, that it will pay off better later. And I think it's the communication of some players accepting that and some not. And like David said, he's like, if I didn't know, and it was just that would suck. And I think, Brian, what you're saying is you have some players that are like, ooh, okay, I'm excited for the next time we meet this villain. And other players who are just kind of like, what the hell? And so I think it's.
So one thing that I was just going to say is I kind of get where you're coming from, where you have to make the players kind of understand that this is a storytelling moment. Mm-hmm. So what I would do is I would not have this have been a combat encounter. I would have kind of just made it more of a cutscene. So in video games, cutscenes are used to tell the story and move the plot forward. So I would have maybe had at most one round of combat and then go on into a narration mode and been like, you just see the minions just begin to overpower you in combat, and slowly but surely your strength fails, and you just kind of narrate it from there and just try to put as much narration chops into it as possible.
Wow. I totally disagree with both of you. Sorry, guys. No, okay. I just don't think he should ever take away player agency, and I know he's trying to go for the cinematic moment, but putting them in a situation that they couldn't win, I wouldn't do it. Even narrating it the way David would do it, I wouldn't do.
But here's the thing, he didn't take away player agency at all. He just gave them a fight that's very hard, and I'm guessing they didn't run away.
No, but he intended them to be knocked out and then be rescued. It's railroading. So I think his goal here was to make them meet the villain and show them how
the power. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, and I think you could do that in a different scene. Even just you meet him, you have a little role play moment, and then he sends his goons after you while he exits out the back, and then you get to have a fair fight. Or maybe he could even just shoot someone, they're unconscious in the first round. Like, you don't have to wipe the party.
Oh.
Or maybe they're already in a fight and he comes up and like makes them have a huge disadvantage. Like, he casts a spell that makes an easy fight into a really hard fight.
Okay, so I have something that's really interesting. The whole idea of like, should you just make it a cutscene and make it like, okay, and describe and kind of railroad them? I mean, not kind of, absolutely railroad them. Or do you give them the illusion of choice when there really isn't? And that's the really interesting debate of if you'd have that. But I think a story that I have, a personal story that really shows this off. One of the best sessions of any role-playing game I've ever done was in a game called Super Random that we created. It's basically just like, random superpowers, and you have kind of these superheroes interacting with each other, and it's very loosey-goosey, and it's really fun. In this session, I had like basically this group of kind of Justice League Avengers, like a group of superheroes who had been playing together for a while, and they're a good team at this point. They know how to use teamwork and use their powers together to make cool things happen. So I started them off and I just said, like, no context. I was like, you guys are in a city and you guys are fighting these robots. And so these robots just show up and it's like very cliche fight. But they're realizing these robots have a ton of health. Like, they're not getting damaged. And they start beating them like bad. And suddenly a player goes down. And suddenly another superhero goes down. And suddenly, like, oh my god. And then they see another superhero is ripped in half. And they see another superhero is killed. And suddenly there's one guy left. And he's like, oh my god. And then he is dead. And I had players freaking out. They were getting up from the table, leaving. They were so upset that this character they put so much backstory in was just killed in front of them. And then I had one player who was playing kind of the Nick Fury type organizational character come out and just go... and just says, all right, guys, we can do better. And suddenly, like, all of the illusions fall and they were in a simulation and they're all back to normal. But like, and all the players are like, like, because they thought it was real and they thought their character, like, they're seeing their buddy be ripped in half in front of them. Like, and so what I did was I absolutely deceived the characters. But many of those players from that game will look back and be like, yeah, I felt so much in that moment and I didn't know. And so I would ask my fellow co-hosts, do you guys think what I did was wrong? Or do you think what I did is deceptive to the point of you wouldn't do it?
I think I would do that.
No, I think
because it wasn't real. Like, you were able to hit this undo button.
Yeah.
But the problem for Bryant is that it was really happening, even though they weren't really in quote unquote danger because they were going to be rescued. Making the players, I don't know.
It's tough
I'm gonna stick with my guns.
Because at the end of the day, nothing. Like, I don't know the specifics of Bryant's situation, but like, I don't know if they lost anything permanently. Were all their magic items taken? If they weren't, like, really, no harm really came of that encounter, other than they got their butts kicked, and the villain is now seen as more deadly. I don't know. I don't see the disadvantage of this.
The thing is, like, when you see the railroad and you have no way of, and you know where it's going, it just kind of sucks because it's like, well, I'm here. I know where it's going.
Okay, we're getting we're getting really philosophical, but if you're reading like a Stephen King book, do you go, ugh, I kind of see where this plot's going, and do you set down the book? Or do you go, no, I want to see how this ends. I trust the author to lead me into a place that is fulfilling.
No, see,
I've been a part of games where I've seen the railroad and I've just been bored.
So it wasn't a good...
And I'm just like, no, and it wasn't a good conclusion because it was just kind of like, this is the roads, this is where it's going. You have no way of interacting with it. This is how it's going to end. And if it doesn't end that way, I'm going to make it end that way.
Yeah, the way I would have foreshadowed a boss would be very differently. Because first of all, I wouldn't have pushed the players into a fight with the big giant boss. But I would have let them know, there's all kinds of flashing signs saying, don't go this way. This is where the boss and all of his goons are. Like, you'll die if you go here. And so if they got into the situation, they would really die because they chose to ignore the warnings and go. But that's just me. That's just the kind of game that I like to run.
Yeah, I think, Brian...
I think having a...
Go ahead, David.
I think having a more social encounter with a boss and them showing their power against someone else would be much more interesting because you get to interact with the boss and talk with them, and then you get to see them flex their muscles on someone else who is about the same size or maybe bigger than you, and get to see them get destroyed. And then it's like, oh crap!
You set up another party that like was established as being more powerful than the real like main players, and then you have the boss kill them where the players can see it, and they're like, holy crap! Like he just walked over them, and that I think gives them the same feeling of like fear and threat as doing this.
So Brian, I would task you with because it sounds like your players are split, which is interesting. Which I would whether you text them or send them a Facebook message or whatever you do to communicate with them, I would send them individually, not as a party, but individually, and say like, what'd you think about this encounter? How could I have done it better? Did you feel like this was fulfilling? Did you not like me railroading you? And all these things, and get their independent insight and see what they liked or disliked about it. I think there's this weird thing in Dungeons and Dragons where you feel bad for critiquing the dungeon master because you know how hard they've worked on everything, and you feel like you don't want to be like, this could have been better, or if you would have changed this one thing, it would have been so much better. But that communication like makes you a better dungeon master. So that I would just push for that.
Yeah. This is actually the best answer that we've talked about for this, is ask your players and want to improve. Like if you want to improve, like it's great like you sending stuff to us, but you should be asking your players first of all, because they're going to be the ones experiencing your dungeon mastering abilities in the game. So in order to have a better session, you want to be talking to your players and kind of discussing with them, like, what is the ideal game that you guys want to be striving for, and how can you make it happen?
I couldn't agree more. If you have a Vault question of your own, you can send it to voxarcanapodcast@gmail.com. We would love to answer. I will probably write a response long before you hear your letter on the show. But if not, trust that we are reading your stuff. Thank you for listening to Vox Arcana episode 13. I'm William.
I'm Jake.
And I'm David.
We'll see you next time. Follow us on social media. Our Twitter is @VoxArcanaPod. Our Facebook and Instagram are both @VoxArcanaPodcast. And as mentioned before, you can email us at voxarcanapodcast@gmail.com. If you meet all three of us in person, you are granted a wish.